I'd like to begin this meeting of Bethlehem City Council for Tuesday, June 7, 2011. Will everyone please stand for the invocation to be given by Pastor Craig Whiteman of Hope Alliance Church, and please remain standing for the pledge to the flag, please.
Let's pray. God of heaven and earth, every good and perfect gift comes from you. Thank you for the gift of community, and though we sometimes struggle to live up to the ideals of community, you're patient with us and gracious to grant us from your hand that which we need to fill the gap where we fall short if we'll simply look to you. So that's what we do now. We look to you for your presence with us this evening and for guidance in the conduct of the business of our community. The scriptures declare that wisdom calls aloud in the street, that she raises her voice in the public square. It's written, get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. God, you've told us that if we lack wisdom, all we need to do is ask, and you'll give generously, and you won't even find fault with us for asking. So we ask for wisdom, not earthly wisdom, but wisdom that comes as a gift from above, the kind of wisdom the scriptures say is shown by a good life, by deeds done in humility, without bitterness, envy, or selfish ambition. Wisdom that is pure, peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy, impartial, and sincere. So, Lord, make us humble enough to admit the limits of our own insights and understanding. Make us charitable enough to recognize the value of others' perspectives, even though we may disagree. And make us courageous enough and compassionate enough to make good and wise decisions that are in the best interest of the common good and that are honoring to you. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please call the roll.
Present. Mr. Deacherson.
Present.
Ms. Dolan. Present. Mr. Evans.
Present.
Mr. Mallett.
Present.
Mr. Reynolds.
Present.
Mr. Donchev.
Present. We'll move to item 4, approval of the minutes for May 18. Any comments? Minutes stand approved. I'm going to ask Mr. Spadoni, before courtesy to the floor, to make a comment here on the main issue that's on the agenda. Mr. Spadoni.
If the board pleases, as you are aware, there has been as much activity in excess of 500 emails in reference to this ordinance, and there have been matters brought to my attention most recently as of about 5 after 6 tonight. And as a result of that, I would suggest to council that this matter on the vote of the ordinance be continued for a period of 2 weeks. And I have 2 specific issues to look at that are in reference to the expanded powers section under the ordinance as to whether in fact there is subpoena power and the orders that may be emanating from the Human Relations Commission. As you may recall, probably don't recall this, but number 12 was tabled after our last meeting, and that was language that was, I believe, retrieved from Chairman Glassman. And there was some discussion as to whether the word commission referred to City Council or referred to the Human Relations Commission. And premised upon that in my discussions with Ms. Biedenkopf after 6 o'clock this evening, I would ask that you will continue this for 2 weeks to vote on it at the next meeting. I think it's very important that when we get it right, and that's my recommendation.
Just make sure I'm clear, Mr. Spadoni. You're recommending the council, and when you inform the clerk, we did do a rough telephone poll on this issue, that everything, when we get to the ordinance that's on the agenda, table the ordinance, and no discussion on the ordinance at all this evening, do everything on June 21st, correct?
I think that that's correct in its entirety for council, but I understand that there's a lot of people here, and I would think that we should have a right to speak on that as it's listed on the agenda.
I would agree with that, but let me ask my colleagues, is there a consensus to follow the recommendation of Solicitor Spadoni? Maybe Ms. Dolan, go right ahead.
Is this the sort of a situation where we would actually, it would us more to postpone to a certain time as opposed to table, since table is sort of amorphous, whereas if we postpone for a particular reason or postponed to a certain time, then we know why we're doing it and when we're going to bring it up again, as opposed to putting the table limbo.
Well, when we, Mr. Spadoni, go ahead.
I think it should be set to a specific time at the next meeting, whenever that is, and I'm not sure when that is.
Well, officially June 21st. Okay. Is it the consensus, any other comments of council? How about a show of hands if there's a consensus to table everything and have it on the June 21st? One, a consensus to table, to have no discussion this evening. Permit public comment though, but they have the discussion. 1, 2, 3, 4, there's a majority. Okay. We will place this on the agenda for the next meeting, but to be fair, since this happened so quickly, as Solicitor Spadoni said on some legalese, I will, since it is on the agenda, it won't be tabled until we get to that point, and then there'll be a motion, parliamentary motion to table, and there'll be a vote. But to be fair to everyone that came here this evening, I will permit public comment, 5-minute time limit for anyone who would like to address City Council on this issue. And I'll go from this list, and then at the end, if there's anyone that did not sign up, you're more than welcome to speak on that issue. And again, I apologize, and I know Mr. Spadoni, this happened so quickly, but Mr. Shanker.
Adrian Shanker, 1020 Chew Street, Allentown, Pennsylvania, and the Vice President of Pennsylvania Diversity Network. I'm quite frankly speechless to find out about 3 minutes before this meeting tonight that this issue is not going to be discussed and voted on in its final form. After receiving more than 500 emails to each one of you and to the mayor, multiple points of contact from residents and people in the city of Bethlehem and the Lehigh Valley at large, asking you to fix the amendment tonight and then vote in this final passage tonight. It's really, you've had 2 weeks to look at this specific issue. I had a conversation with Mr. Spadoni approximately 2 weeks ago where we talked about this very issue. It's really amazing that the night of the vote this has not been figured out. Last night, the city of Easton yesterday the city of Easton, the mayor signed a relationship recognition ordinance into law. At that meeting in the city of Easton, not one member of council voted against it, and not one member of the public spoke against that ordinance, and the mayor signed it into law. The same thing happened in Allentown. In Bethlehem, we're talking about passing a law that says you can't fire someone from their job, or deny someone housing, or discriminate against them in education, or kick them out of a restaurant for a number of reasons, including race, religion, sexual orientation, disability, gender identity, and the list goes on. And this is taking months. This was introduced by the mayor in September, and the final vote was scheduled for tonight. The city clerk emailed many people that are here tonight. We have dozens of people here to support this, including people from as far away as Harrisburg, that drove in at the email request from the city clerk, notifying them that this meeting was happening tonight. And about 3 minutes before the meeting, we find out that that's not happening. I certainly respect the decision to make this happen right, to fix the ordinance, to fix the religious exemption, and to make sure that the commission has the full powers it needs to be able to enforce the law, just like you give to your police department, as you should give to the police department, and as you should give to the Human Relations Commission. But there's no reason that this needs to be delayed 2 more weeks. I'm astounded that this was the decision of the city solicitor this late in the game, after months of discussion, weeks of talking about this specific issue, and minutes before the meeting to make this decision. So my request of City Council is that the organization that has, the prime organization that has led this effort in the city of Bethlehem is Pennsylvania Diversity Network, which has our annual gala, which we've been planning since about January, on June 21st. A majority of the people in this room that are here to support this ordinance are going to be at an event that they've purchased tickets for, and that we have speakers coming in for, and award winners being that are receiving awards. The night that you just suggested to have the final vote, I would respectfully request that you postpone the meeting until Wednesday the 22nd, so that the vast majority of the people that are here to speak on this can still attend. Because we want to be here when you pass this, and we want to support the work of the city of Bethlehem to make this an equal and welcoming city for all people, which is unfortunate that people are going to have to wait an extra 2 weeks for this to be a welcoming and equal city. But I would really hope that City Council will respect the reality, just as you have the reality that maybe you need another 2 weeks to work on these issues, that the organization that has been working, starting with the mayor, actually last March, to talk to him about this initially, when it was introduced in September, and now we're in June again. This organization has been planning this event for months, and we would really strongly urge you to consider not holding your final vote on the same night, given the fact that you've decided to do this about an hour ago. So, I respect your decision. I don't agree. I think you could pass this tonight. And I think that this is. I'm not sure what the rationale is for this, but I do respect your decision. But respectfully hope that you will delay this until at least the 22nd. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Martin?
Good evening. My name is Ted Martin. I'm not a resident of the city of Bethlehem. I'm actually one of the people who drove in from Harrisburg. I'm the executive director of Equality Pennsylvania, which is the statewide lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender political advocacy organization. I too am not unhappy to be in Bethlehem because it is a wonderful place, but I am certainly disappointed at the results of what I'm hearing this evening. I received the notice and made plans to come here this evening, hoping to take back to a large portion of the constituency I represent, which is the entire state, quite frankly, good news that Bethlehem had indeed joined with all the other 20 cities across Pennsylvania in embracing this kind of diversity, in embracing this kind of protection. As I ran out today to come here, after a day lobbying on Capitol Hill where I talked to many members of the legislature about a possible constitutional marriage amendment, when I talked about the support that is statewide for passing a non-discrimination bill, I went back to my office, and as I ran out the door, my phone rang. And I picked up the phone, and it was a person who calmly described to me some discrimination that they had just received, that they had just been on the receiving end of, quite frankly, when they were refused service in a store. It wasn't in Bethlehem, but it was certainly nearby, and I can honestly tell you that for me to have to say, I have no remedy for you, call your legislator, it is a cold comfort. It is a cold comfort that I take to them. I talk to them about coming to their city councils so that once all of you act, all 2,500 municipalities across Pennsylvania finally act, and the legislature finally figures out that maybe they should do something, I always say about 108 years from now, that maybe then this will change, and I won't receive calls like this. So I need to ask you that in the next 2 weeks to continue to think about this, because I can tell you this much, that the letters and the calls and the conversations that will come from my community will continue, because we want Bethlehem to join those other cities. We want Bethlehem to be a leader, and we want Bethlehem to offer the same protections, quite frankly, that people who are Americans and who contribute every day deserve. So I thank you for this time. I thank you for allowing me to speak this evening, and I ask you to keep this on your agenda and keep it strongly on your agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Crownfield?
Peter Crownfield, current address 407 Delaware Avenue. I'm a little perplexed by the last minute change too, and I understand there are reasons, and I certainly agree that it's much better to get it right than to rush it through. But I can't say that we're anything like rushing it through. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. And the major issues were raised not even 2 weeks ago, or at the last council meeting, but at the committee meeting. So these are not basically new issues. And I think it's kind of disappointing to see that they haven't been worked out yet, and more carefully than in the text that I read, picked up out on the table. Many of you have heard me speak here before, and I've often spoken on behalf of the local Bill of Rights Defense Committee. And in a sense, that's my motivation here today. I'm not one of the people who is most likely to be targeted that this ordinance would protect. But I am concerned that many of my friends and acquaintances are concerned about certain establishments or certain practices in Bethlehem, certain offices, and they feel comfortable on the high campus, for instance, students, faculty, staff members, And they do not feel as comfortable in town because they don't know quite what to expect. Now, I think some cases they're unnecessarily worried, but other cases are very real, and I can't say to a person that they shouldn't be worried. They have reason to be worried. There is discrimination that goes on. It goes on every day. So that's why I think a year, and a year plus an additional couple of weeks. I mean, these days matter. Every day matters to the people who are discriminated against. I think the two concerns that I'm aware of are the what I will term at least, the overbroad religious exemption, which seems to exempt not only truly religious institutions from having to hire or retain people in positions that are teaching or involved in the practice of the faith, but actually allow them to hire or to discriminate against anyone in any position for any reason. And it's not just churches, it's also fraternal organization or private organization. That means basically anybody. We could form an organization right now. All we have to do is become a bona fide organization, then we can do whatever we want. That's not a reasonable ordinance. It doesn't provide the protections that you're here to provide. And I think that perhaps this was analyzed best and presented best by Andy Hoover from the state ACLU at the last council meeting. And they deal with cases from both sides of the religious issues. There's no, he made the point so well, I'm not even going to try to repeat them, but there's no need and no point for this council to enact an ordinance that puts in all kinds of slippery language and creative exemptions when there's tried and true language. And no one can force any religion in any event to do something that's against the tenets of the religion. So I think that's a lot of attention being given to an issue that's not really an issue. And it's weakened this ordinance greatly. And I'm not too familiar with the enforcement provisions, but I will say that with no enforcement provisions or with weakened enforcement provisions, again, you're taking what is a really wonderful step forward for Bethlehem and you're weakening it. Why would you want to do that? Thank you.
Thank you. Reverend Elizabeth Gowdy.
My name is Elizabeth Gowdy. I live in Schnecksville. I pastor Metropolitan Community Church of the Lehigh Valley in Allentown. And the church has several members living and working in Bethlehem who would be directly affected by this legislation. I thank you for the opportunity to speak here tonight. This Human Relations Commission legislation is good for Bethlehem and it's good for the Lehigh Valley. Protecting your citizens from discrimination sends the message that you value your citizens and you believe that everyone should be free from prejudicial treatment. A number of religious communities have a long history of supporting equality and inclusion. There are a number of religious communities that take very seriously God's word through the prophet Isaiah. For my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. Not some people, but all peoples. However, religious communities that prefer to exclude will retain the right to discriminate as they wish. For instance, no church will be forced to accept people they don't want to accept as church members. For example, no church will be forced to hire people they do not want as employees. All houses of worship would be exempt, and that makes sense. But the religious exemption must not be too broad, and it must not serve as a cover for any affiliated entity who wants to discriminate. And so I would strongly encourage the council to use the language from the state of Pennsylvania's Human Relations Commission for the religious exemption. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are not just for a handful of lucky people in the United States, they are for all people. Municipal government can ensure that its citizens have equal access to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness through non-discrimination ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Barbara Sittler? Barbara Sittler? Would you like to speak? No? Thank you. Mr. Larry Hubbard?
Larry Humbert, 1702 11th Street, Bethlehem Township. Broad language is a two-way street. Last month, I was accused of using talking points of the opposition to Article 145. What I'm about to share is not talking points, it's reality. Your proposed ordinance states that nothing in this chapter shall be construed as supporting or advocating any particular doctrine, position, point of view, lifestyle, or religious view. To the contrary, it is an intention of this charter that all persons be treated fairly and equally, and that the express intent of this chapter is to guarantee fair and equal treatment under the law to all peoples in the city of Bethlehem. Your statement is an oxymoron. You are redefining morality. You are demanding that what once was moral be declared immoral, and what was immoral is now considered moral. You are declaring that anyone who disagrees with your new definition will not be tolerated. In fact, you are doing exactly the opposite of what your ordinance is meant to do. You are redefining morality for us and telling us that our lifestyle and religious view can only be practiced inside the walls of a religious institution, but when we go to work or care about our community, we must cooperate, we must operate by your newly defined definitions. Tonight you are discussing exemptions concerning religious institutions. The problem is you're not permitting people of faith to practice their conscience in their daily life. A doctor who has a conscientious objection to performing a sex change operation must set aside his personal beliefs and perform the surgery. You are saying a college or university that sees cohabitation of students that are unmarried as wrong must set aside its beliefs and open the dorms to whatever the students wish. You are saying a photographer or a caterer with a conscience must set aside their beliefs in their profession and cannot withhold their services to any party, regardless of its sexual expression. Not just gay, but businessmen seeking clients of whatever sexual nature. You are saying that a charitable organization that provides adoption of children may not judge a possible home based on sexual expression, many forms of which could be harmful to children. I am in full agreement that things like bullying, ill treatment of people with whom you disagree is wrong, and that that issue should be dealt with. But you are not ready for the true outcome of your provision of the broad statement, sexual expression and gender identity. You are going to say, I am wrong here. And it may not happen next month or even next year, but it won't be long until prostitution will be legalized in Bethlehem. And before and after that, polygamy become part of our local culture. And these are just the start of ill effects of opening those doors wide to what you are calling sexual expression. Last month, the antics of Governor Schwarzenegger were spoken against by a council person. While I personally agree with the sentiment expressed, under your new definition, you are proposing that sexual expression, your opinion against Governor Schwarzenegger, has no place in public forum. If you find Congressman Wiener's tweets objectionable under the new morality of sexual expression, you are out of line. If you must pass some ordinance on take out the selection of sexual expression, gender identity, and pass the other provisions of this ordinance on which we all agree, then allow a careful and thoughtful study for the community to take place in order to foster peace in our community and to protect goodness, kindness, gentleness, and self-control. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Liz Bradbury.
Liz Bradbury, I live at 427.5 North 9th Street in Allentown. When someone speaks like this before me, I have an opportunity to point out to you that clearly there are people in Bethlehem that would take any opportunity to discriminate against gay and lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people. Sometimes the people who are anti-gay say that gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people are not discriminated against. There are no instances of discrimination. But when people can stand up and speak to City Council and say to them that, their definition of morality must be followed by every single person, their religion must be followed by every single other person, I mean, pretty soon what's going to happen is Bethlehem's going to legalize gambling. Anyway, in the last meeting regarding this important legislation was somewhat contentious because some of the rather surprising amendments. In particular, there were very broad religious exemptions and the removal of powers of the Commission to investigate and act on discrimination complaints. In the spirit of compromise and to support the intent of the law in a balanced way, some new compromise language has been offered, and I'm hoping this language will be amended into the ordinance. I want to mention it specifically because others will be referring to it. The intent of the law is to protect people from discrimination, and the intent of the religious exemption is to exempt religious denominations and religious organizations. The compromise is easy and very logical. Simply change the words any church, synagogue, mosque to more fully inclusive words, any religious organization, religious denomination, or association of religious organizations or denomination, and change the word entity to organization. Because what you are trying to protect are religious organizations or groups, not any creature, organism, life form, body, object, article, or thing, which is the definition of entity. Religious organizations or religious denominations are exempt in order to follow their religious beliefs or to be in accordance with their missions. That is the intent of a religious exemption, and this new language will achieve that in a fully inclusive and fair way. After all, when you talk about a church with a small c, as it's written in the current language, the words church, synagogue, mosque actually mean bricks and mortar buildings, and not the organizations or denominations that meet within. The definition of organization that would be proposed in this new language would be and should be included in the ordinance, would be any institution, group, agency, association, or society consisting of a group of people with a particular purpose. I think everyone can agree that that would include all types of religious groups, not just the 3 buildings mentioned. This amendment language meets everyone's needs, and it will do exactly what it's intended to do. Prevent discrimination against the enumerated protected classes and exempt religious or mission-driven organizations whose mission it is to advance a particular group or religion. I strongly encourage you to amend the religious exemption to this more inclusive and more fair language. I also encourage you to reinstate the power of the proposed Human Relations Commission to investigate and act on discrimination complaints. I can say from experience, from my experience, as the investigator of the Allentown Human Relations Commission, the presence of that power in the ordinance is the teeth of a Human Relations Commission. Without it, the law becomes a hollow gesture, and clearly that is not your intent or the intent of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Corey Horvath.
Mr. President, I would respectfully decline public comment at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Weidman, Reverend Weidman.
First, just generally to the ordinance, do we have perfect language right now? I think we're probably largely agreed here for different reasons that we don't. I would like to see the religious exemption a little tighter and cleaner. There are some other aspects of the ordinance that probably could be cleaned up. The delay until the next council meeting certainly may be warranted if there is a legal issue that would say, hey, don't pass this yet. We don't want it challenged in court. And there certainly would be worth the time of making sure we get the bill right before final passage. But does the bill have to be perfect? Probably over the next 2 weeks, you still won't get the language perfect. I do urge you to work on the things that can better the bill. I would say we may not even have a very good bill right now, but I think we have a good one now. If we can tweak it a little better, even though it's not perfect or close to perfect, I would really urge a unanimous passage, even if there's one area still that you're thinking, we got to get this wordsmithed a little better. Because what will happen is we'll